Hi guys, Kathy Richards RD hopping on for the 3 keys to end emotional eating. So in this webinar, I'm going to help you walk through the main areas that we need to shift when we're finally ready to overcome emotional eating. So welcome and thanks for joining. So even though it's a webinar that you're following along at your own pace, I'm not doing it live this time, I still want you guys to consider shutting off your distractions so you can give yourself the feedback that you're important and you're taking this time for yourself. If you followed any of my trainings, because I work with busy mompreneurs, I don't leave my trainings to be really long. 20-30 minutes at the max is what I usually spend. So you won't be able to, you won't be missing out on things if you shut off your windows, your other tabs, and shut off your phones and things. Worksheet, look at the bottom of the video and you'll be able to grab that 3 keys to emotional eating worksheet. So you can pause this right now and go and grab that sheet, and then you can walk through the 3 keys with me. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathy Richards. I'm a registered dietitian. I have been helping people improve their health and wellness for the last 20 years. So a little bit more about me. I'm a single mom of 3. So they're my kids a few years ago. Now they're 4, 6, and 8. One will be 7 in a couple weeks. Less than 10 days, so maybe in a week. I'm also an emotional eater, and especially in 2020, I found that emotional eating came back up as a challenge for me as I went through the pandemic. I went through a divorce and some family losses as well. So these strategies I'm going to share with you guys today are not only things that I use for my clients, but they're actually strategies that I use for myself to keep my energy up and keep me feeling good, even when we kind of get on that emotional roller coaster. As I said, I've been a registered dietitian for over 20 years. That means, regular self-guided learning tools and self-direction. It means I've had a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree behind me. I've also had additional training. And then I have a regulatory body who oversees to make sure I'm providing up-to-date and current information. So I want you guys to think about, before we get into the, the real meat of things, do you consider yourself an emotional eater? Okay, so I want you to take a minute and think about that. An emotional eater, so when I work with my clients in the emotional eating group that I run, we actually interchange emotional eating with problematic eating. Okay, so when I'm talking about emotional eating, I'm thinking problematic eating. So it could be 3 different things. It could be that you're eating unhealthy foods often. It could be that you're eating too much at one time. And again, that's got a range to it, right? So some people might feel if they are eating 1 chocolate bar, that's too much, where other people might have to eat 2 or 3 before they feel like they've gone over their threshold. Or if you think about a pack of cookies, one person might think like, oh, I had 1 cookie, that's emotional eating, that's too much, that's problematic. Whereas another person might think, okay, like if I have up to 8, that's okay. If I go over 8, that's not okay. So think about what emotional eating means to you. It also can be when you're eating when you're not physically hungry. And we're going to talk about that as one of the keys to end emotional eating, is starting to recognize when it's emotional eating, and I'll walk you through how to do that. Okay, so think about, do you consider yourself an emotional eater? And it could be one of those 3 things. So it could be eating unhealthy foods often, too much food, even if it's healthy food, that can be emotional eating, or problematic eating, or is eating when you're not really physically hungry. Okay, so I'd encourage you to think on that. You obviously came to this training for a reason, so I'm going to guess that you might fall into one of those categories. So today in the training, what I'm going to cover is 3 keys to end emotional eating. So key number 1, we're going to learn to identify the type of hunger that you're experiencing. That is a game changer for people. It's a tool to build self-awareness. It's something that's in my self-awareness checklist, which is linked at the bottom of the video as well. That's kind of like the first step to end your emotional eating. So it's a key thing. Key number 2, we're going to look at how self-awareness factors into improving your relationship with food. Okay, so we'll walk you through a little bit further. And then key number 3 is learning how to work with your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to break that cycle of emotional eating once and for all. And you'll notice I talk with my hands, so I move my hands as I'm speaking. So I want you guys to ask yourself this. How would it feel if you stopped emotional eating? Okay, if you knew that once you had um, a bad day or if something stressful happened or if you got some bad news, that you wouldn't automatically go to food as your answer and food as that comforting thing, how would that feel? If you had the control to say, okay, I'm not hungry, this is my emotions I'm trying to support. How can I support my emotions in a different way? I want you to think about in your body physically how you would feel. Okay. A lot of people, when I ask them this question, they they don't know how they would feel. So I'll share an example for you that might make it a bit easier. So I want to share with you one of my clients that went through my emotional eating. She did a one-on-one program with me. So this is Heidi. So before she came to see me, when she came to see me on the first session, she was a busy mom. She had a lot of shame around eating. She felt really uncomfortable in her body. So, I see a lot of clients that are uncomfortable, and as they're talking to me, they're like pulling their shirts out, to make it not feel as tight on their body. So she was quite shifty the first time that we met. She was, moving a lot and trying to adjust her clothes, and she'd really isolated herself. She didn't feel comfortable eating in a social environment, so she wasn't going out and socializing with her friends as much because she didn't feel comfortable having that connection with people around food. So she came to see me and we worked through the emotional eating program that I run. We worked through it as a one on one with her because at that point I wasn't offering a group session. So that was her before we started to work together. And we worked together over a period of 6 months. And after we worked together, she came back to see me at about 9 months after we worked together. And this was what we really noticed was the game changer for her. So after we did our time together, she was still that busy mom. She was still, doing university courses and working full time, all the things that she was trying to get done. But she noticed, and it wasn't actually till she sat down and we spoke and we were reviewing how things were going, she didn't even have the awareness that she was changed as much as she had. So she ate until she was comfortably full. So as we were reviewing, she was like, oh, yeah, I'm not eating until the point where I feel like my stomach hurts. So she noticed, oh, yeah, I'm starting to eat until I'm just comfortable. She was celebrating what her body could do. So she had started to move a bit more, started to do some yoga, started to do some activity with her kids. When she first came to see me, she couldn't bend over and tie her shoes without feeling uncomfortable. So that was a big game changer for her as well. Her weight had started to reduce when she came back to see me at 9 months. I think it had reduced like 15 pounds and she hadn't even noticed because she was more focused on just living her life, but had implemented the strategies that we went over. Another thing that came up with her was her colleagues would often go out to eat, at lunch as a way of connection and socializing before the pandemic, and we could do that. And she noticed that she would go with them, but maybe not as often because she didn't feel the need to comfort herself with food. If she did go and she did order poutine, which if you're not in Canada, that is French fries with gravy and cheese curds on top. So it's a popular item. But what she noticed was she only needed one bite to be satisfied. She wasn't going to sit and eat the whole thing like she had done for years before that. So lots of changes for Heidi. And the biggest thing that she shared with me was she moved from being out of control, feeling out of control, to being in control. So just by implementing the strategies that we went over in our time together, she automatically felt more control over her eating. And it wasn't like she was having to always consciously like look at her notes and write things down. She'd implemented the strategies. They had changed her behavior, and then she felt that control. And she felt great when I saw her. So key number one is something that I walk everyone through, and anyone that goes into my emotional eating program, we cover this, is learn how to identify the type of hunger that you are experiencing. So a lot of people eat and they're not even aware of why they're eating. So the first step to overcome emotional eating is really slowing down and focusing on that self-awareness. So I want you guys to take a minute, pause the video, write down all the reasons that you eat. Grab a piece of paper, or if you downloaded the worksheet, write down all the reasons that you eat. And I want you to identify every reason that you can think of. There's no wrong reason for why you're eating. Okay, so take a minute and do that, and then come back to the video. All right, so if we look, this is something that I do when I run my groups, and we go through all the reasons that we eat. So we might eat when we're excited, we might eat because it's a social activity, we might eat because we're celebrating, we're hungry, to manage diabetes or some other health condition. The food is there, we might feel lonely, we might be out with friends, we might be bored, it might be a lunch meeting, so you're expected to eat, it might be visiting family, and that's the expectation, is that you're going to always eat together. So there's lots of different reasons why we eat. We celebrate with food in our culture. It's a big thing, everyone meets around food. So the point of this exercise is to go through, see why you ate, and then figure out what kind of hunger it really represents. So if you look on here, you'll see hearts and mouths and fork and knives. So the fork and knife is stomach hunger, that's really eating when you're hungry. The heart is mouth hunger, and the mouth is mouth hunger. I'm going to go through each of those individually. So the type of hunger, the first type of hunger is stomach hunger. So stomach hunger means you haven't eaten for, a few hours, 4 to 6 hours. If you're doing a fasting program, maybe it's longer, but you actually feel physical hunger. Okay, so you feel rumbling in your stomach, you might feel lightheaded, you might feel a bit irritated or a bit hangry, because your body wants you to have some kind of food to give it the energy. Okay, this is the reason we should be eating, because we have stomach hunger. Okay, another type of hunger that we'll talk about is mouth hunger. So what is mouth hunger? Mouth hunger is more of a craving for something. It might be that you feel like you're craving something, you go to the cupboard, you want something salty, but nothing jumps out. You open the fridge, can't really figure out what you want, but you're craving something. And quite often we're craving another activity or something, not the food per se. Mouth hunger might also be represented in a situation where you're walking down the street, you walk by a bakery, you weren't planning to go into the bakery, but you smell the food, the baked goods, as someone walks by and opens the door, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go in there and get something. Or it used to happen to me at work quite often with lunch and learns. A lot of the doctors would have, pharmaceutical reps come in, do lunch for them, and then they would leave the leftover food in the lunchroom after. And I would go in the lunchroom to get a tea or whatever after lunch, and I would have this back and forth conversation with myself about, I'm not really hungry. This is just because the food has presented itself. So that was an example of mouth hunger for me. The last type of hunger is heart hunger. So if you think back to that list I showed you, and if you look at your list, I'm going to guess that most of your answers on your list have to do with heart hunger. So heart hunger is when we're eating for emotions. Okay, it could be because it reminds us of something when we grew up. It could be that we're bored or we're lonely, or it could be a learned behavior as well. And I'll go through what the learned behaviors are, but it's something that's tied to an emotional need. So it's not physical hunger, but it's managing your emotions with food, and that would be heart hunger. So what you could do is go through the next week and identify, every time you're eating, just stop and try to identify, is it stomach hunger, mouth hunger, or heart hunger? Okay, and just start to create the awareness. Key number 2 to end emotional eating is to think about self-awareness and learn about self-awareness factors, how it factors into improving your relationship with food. Okay, so again, you're gonna have these self-awareness around what type of hunger you're experiencing. Is it true physical hunger, or are you trying to feed something else? The next step is to think about the things that influence our eating. Okay, so we eat under the influence of other factors, not just physical hunger, right? So eating under the influence, what I mean by that is, think about your environment. And I put this picture of these old gas tanks up there for a reason. Because previously you go to get gas back in the day and it would just be like a little ticker. Somebody might fill up your car, but there was no food around you when you were getting gas. You went to the gas station to get gas. Now you go to the gas station, it's all digital. It's telling you, you know, you can come in and buy a 2-for-1 chocolate bar. It might have like a little advertisement thing like stuck on the top of it. So food is there, whereas in previous years it wasn't there. Okay, our environment has changed. Another one that can be linked to that is think about your car and how many cup holders it has. And think back to the days when there were no cup holders in cars because it wasn't a place where people would eat food, right? You ate at home, and when you left your house, you'd usually pack something up and bring it with you. So our environment has changed, and now you can't go a block without running into some kind of food outlet or convenience store. So have that awareness. A lot of people put the blame on themselves when they're not able to control their eating. But when you start to look around you, there's so many things that influence. So it's just to start again to have the awareness around what's influencing your eating. So think about your environment. Eating under the influence of our body. So our body's a big one. I did a video earlier today for a worksheet that I'm building about sleep. Okay, so sleep, if we don't get enough sleep and we're tired and we're trying to get energy, we're going to feel like we need to eat more food. Okay, so there's lots of factors: how much we move, how much stress we're under influences that hunger and fullness as well. If you skip meals, if you go a long time between your meals and then eat a big quantity of food. So there's so many things that influence how our body responds to food as well as how the environment's affecting us. So how we treat our body is important. Sleep is one of the #1 things, but right now stress is a big player in how our body is being influenced as well. So think about the way that you're treating your body and the things that you might need to adjust in order to treat it a bit better. Eating under the influence, so you've got environment, our body, and then we've got learned behaviors. So when I talked about heart hunger, I said learned behaviors fall under that. So what is a learned behavior? A learned behavior is something that over time we've paired with something else and then it's become the behavior that we expect. So for example, the only time that we're actually eating out of true physical hunger is when we are a baby and we are breastfed. Okay, if a breastfed baby's not hungry, it's not going to eat. But over time, we start to learn different behaviors. So we start to learn that we should eat following the clock, maybe at school. That's a time for kids to learn how to eat. Or it could be a learned behavior that a kid gets upset. The parents don't like to see the child upset, so they give the child some food to calm them down. And then there's that learned behavior. I get upset, I need food. Okay, it could be a reward. Lots of people have learned behaviors around food as a reward. You know, the kid does well at their test and they go for ice cream as a reward. So then you get that pairing of something good happens and then the food comes with it. Okay, so there's lots of learned behaviors. So I would encourage you guys over the next week to also think about those learned behaviors that you might have. A big one that I see with a lot of my clients can be always having something sweet to finish their meal. So people that grew up having dessert every day to finish their meal, that's a habit that they've learned and that a behavior that they've learned that they often carry out throughout their life. Some of my clients have commented that they didn't even know that everyone didn't do that until they married their husband or until they started to date their partner or their spouse. And then they realized, gee, they don't expect that. And then that was the behavior that they had to unlearn as a consequence of that. Okay, so you can see we're so quick to blame ourselves, but when we look at all these things that have influenced our eating, there's lots of other factors. So I want you to start to have the awareness of the type of hunger. And then the second step is self-awareness factors around improving your relationship with food. So think about all those influences that are coming past you on a regular basis. And a good way to do that is just to get curious and start journaling. So you could journal every time you eat, mouth, heart, stomach hunger, obviously want to be stomach hunger more. And you could also journal about maybe an environmental influence. Maybe you have to drive by a fast food restaurant every day on their way home and that influences your food behaviors. I've had lots of clients where that's been the case. If they're if somebody else was riding with them, they would stop. But if they were by themselves, they would stop. But sometimes it's in journaling that we're able to really see what's happening. And journaling around food, when I get people to do it, is not so much to change the behavior right away, though we do see journaling causes us to sometimes make different choices, just because we have the awareness of we're going to have to read it. But it's just to get curious and write down everything that you eat, drink, how your sleep is, how your activity level is, bowel movements, because we can really dig into that and see what's happening. Okay, so for this purpose, for journaling, I would do those types of hunger and the influences that may be affected your choices around food or that problematic eating. So key number 3 to end emotional eating is to work with your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to break the cycle once and for all. So most of you are probably aware of the cognitive behavioral therapy approach. And you'll see this quite often, even in the law of attraction teachings and stuff that they might come across. Thoughts create feelings, feeling creates behavior, and behavior reinforces thoughts. Okay, so those things all work together. So again, it's part of the self-awareness piece to start to think, okay, what is the thought that I'm thinking? How does that make me feel? And how do I choose the behavior? So an example of this could be, trying to think of one of my favorite examples. Well, it could be, let's say you're going to an appointment and you're running late because you left your house a few minutes late. So if you're driving to that appointment and the thought running through your head is, oh, I'm such a loser, I'm late again, I should have left the house earlier, I never get out of the house on time, the feeling that that's going to create is going to be stress, anxiety, probably like a little bit agitated. And that's going to affect your driving and the thoughts that continue until you get to the appointment. So you're probably going to be quite grumpy when you get to the appointment as well. So if you're having problem with food choices or having problematic eating episodes and you're not aware of the thought that comes, then that behavior can continue, and then the behavior reinforces that thought, and it's a never-ending cycle. So the first step, is to catch what those thoughts are. So you could sit and think over the course of a day, every time you have a thought about food, it could be anything. It could be, what am I going to make for supper? It could be, oh, that food is there. Oh, that food is there. Like, it's to have the awareness around what your thoughts are around food and just start with that piece. And then there's some techniques that we can use to stop that thought. So we can do thought stopping. You can do other strategies as well. So those are all strategies that I cover when I work with clients on emotional eating. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on those 3 key things. So again, the 3 keys to end emotional eating. Number 1, learn how to identify the type of hunger you're experiencing. Key number 2, learn how self-awareness factors into improving your relationship with food. And key number 3, work with your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to break the cycle once and for all. Okay, so there's a lot of things to focus on, and I would just start with one and get really good at that. So what's next? I want you guys to think about, how would it feel to stop emotional eating? So remember, back to my client example from Heidi, she didn't even really notice, but she had more control. And that's what, after we finished our follow-up session, she said, wow, I have a lot more control over my eating than I did before. But it was simple changes over time that built in and became new habits that caused her to have that feeling around emotional eating. So how would it feel to end emotional eating? So the clients that I work with give me a few examples of how they feel when they've finished working with me or during the process. They said, I feel better physically. And when I look in the mirror, quite often, they're, like I said, they're kind of pulling on their clothes, not feeling comfortable. So quite often after we work on things, they'll start to feel better about themselves. One lady said, I feel empowered and strong. Another client said, I'm back to feeling like my old vibrant self. And another one said, I'm able to get down on the floor and play with my kids. And for her, that was really her goal, was not to be, skinny or back to her like pre-kid size. It was just to physically feel better enough to be able to get on the floor and play with her kids and have energy. Another client said, I feel sexy again and ready to be romantic with my partner again. That client worked with me over a period of 6 months and then came back, took a few months off, and then ended up coming back for another 6 months. So we worked together for quite a while. But in some of the mindset work that we did, and by healing her gut and getting her healthier, the weight loss for her came easily after we figured out what some of the true things were happening. So that was a really interesting one to see. Excuse me. Another client, Jamie, so she did my emotional eating program, and she said, I worked with Kathy to learn how to manage my hunger. A simple change helped me control my cravings and enabled me to have a better nutrition overall. I didn't have to change my entire lifestyle to be healthier, and that's what I appreciate most from our time together. So yeah, she came into my emotional eating group. She was starving every night. We just adjusted some of her food during the day, and those cravings disappeared almost instantly. Another client, Sarah, said, Kathy has been a true pleasure to work with. She has worked hard to holistically care for me. I have found her knowledgeable, compassionate, and patient. And when I found it challenging to change my diet, she supported and encouraged me to make small changes. I really appreciate her effort. So I highlighted holistically there because I'm looking at you as a whole person. Okay. I'm not just coming in and looking at you as to what you're eating, because everything else in our life impacts how we're treating our body and how we're fueling our bodies. So we have to look at the whole person. Small changes I highlighted as well, because that's where I start with 99% of my clients. We had to make small changes that we're going to be able to see good outcomes from, and then we're able to build on that. If we try to start with a whole huge overhaul, take away everything that you know, it's not realistic long-term for most people. So my approach is to start with the small things and work from there. I was also recently audited by my college, my regulatory college, and the results from that came back that 100% of my clients were satisfied with my services, and 100% would recommend me to a family member to come and see. And my colleagues held that same belief and satisfaction with my approach, and they would recommend me 100%. And both of those results came back above average for the other registered dietitians who were audited. So I thought that was interesting. It was great feedback. I'm always happy to hear how clients are experiencing it. So I want to leave you guys with that last thought. How would it feel to stop emotional eating and sit with that for a bit? You could journal that out as well. What would change if you didn't eat for emotional reasons? If you just ate when you were hungry, how would your life change? How would you feel better? Or how would you feel in your body differently? How would your attitude be? There's so many things that we can improve. And I'll point you to, again, the description in the video has a link to the self-awareness checklist. So it's a good tool to use to help you do that identification of the type of hunger. And I've also got some triggers listed there. So you can start to have awareness around what might be triggering some of your problematic eating, and that can be the first step. Okay, so if you guys want to find out more about my emotional eating programs, the link to my website is there. It's option 1 is emotional eating groups. I'm running them on a regular basis. I like to keep them small so we can have a more intimate group. Obviously, everything is happening virtually at this time, but yeah, hopefully we get back to real life at some point. All right, guys, so thanks for watching. Thanks for joining my training today. If you have any questions, please reach out. Kathy at kathyrichardsrd.com, or visit me on my website, or find me on Instagram because I'll be there a lot more often. All right, guys, I hope you're well, and thanks for stopping by.